Hello, dear children. So, we are back here again in the journey of learning. So, today we'll discuss a very interesting and wonderful grammar chapter. I know you must be doubtful when I'm saying interesting and amazing because when the grammar part comes, we are, feeling very tired, bored, and we're not getting the concept exactly. But today we have a very wonderful chapter, that is active and passive voice. You might be surprised that why I'm calling it amazing. I will share you for that some part of a sentence. You will come to know that. See, some children in the school or in the classes or when they do any work, they are forced to do that things, and some children do their own. Are you getting it? These examples are related to the chapter only, active and passive voice. So listen it carefully. When some children are coming to school by their own wish, they are willing to come to school and they are excited. So this kind of groups of children is coming into the active voice because they will and they are doing it by their own. So it is the group of active voice, and the children, those who are not coming in the school, their parents are forcing them, they are beating them sometime to go into the school because they are not willing. So they come into the group of passive voice. Are you getting it? It means what? In the active voice, the subject means children are doing the action. In the passive voice, children are not doing the action, but they are forced to do the action. Getting it? That is what active and passive voice is. I hope it was interesting. Now let's see exactly what active and passive voice is. First of all, we'll look for voice. Voice is a type of kind of sentence here. In that there are two types are formed. One is active voice and second is passive voice. So what active voice does? Look at the example number A. He wrote a letter. Now if I ask you a question, who wrote a letter? You will get the answer he. So he is what here? Subject. So he is doing the action on the verb because he is active here. Alright. So he wrote a letter. He is active and he is acting on the verb. That is very important in the active voice. Got it? So subject is acting on the verb, it is called as active voice. Now when you go to the passive voice, look at the B example. A letter was written by him. Now here the subject which was there active in the active voice sentence, it has become passive in the passive voice sentence. So the subject has become here object. He has become him. And a letter which was object here has become subject in the passive voice. Alright. And the letter was written. So the object letter is forced here to do something. Alright. And for that purpose, a letter is passive voice and subject is not acting here. For that purpose, this is the example of passive voice. Basically, we can just say simply that the subject is passive in passive voice. That's it. Alright, so here a letter was written by him. So you can see I have given a conclusion here. Example number A, it tells us what he did. Okay, he, the subject, what he did? He wrote a letter. So what? Subject is acting on the verb. That is important. And for that purpose, when subject is given there and is active, example of active voice. Now here, the second example, a letter was written by him. So it tells us what was done to the letter. It is telling us what was done to the letter but not done by the subject. And for that purpose, the focus is here on object. And when the object is given at the beginning of the sentence, but the subject is not acting on the verb, it is the example of passive voice. Clear? Let's go to the next point again. Now let's focus more on active voice. Like look at the example, I sing a song. So here I sing a song, it is an example of active voice because I, the subject, is acting on the verb sing. So we have the definition also here. A sentence in which the subject of the verb, this is the verb here, sing, and subject is I, is the agent or door. Agent or door is a new word for you. Door means what here, or agent means what? Subject only of the action. So action is singing and door is subject, that is I, denoted by the verb is said to be in the active voice. So what do you mean by this definition exactly? When the subject is acting on the verb, okay, when the subject is acting on the verb, denoted means what here? It is done on the verb. Alright, for that purpose it is example of active voice. So simply we can say that the subject is active, it acts or does something, for that purpose it is active voice. Clear? So these are the simple basic techniques to understand active voice. Now let's go to the next point, passive voice. Now look at the same example. I gave you the example like I sing a song. That same example I'll change into passive voice. Okay, we'll talk about passive voice now. So a song is sung by me. So here song was the object in the previous active voice sentence. It has become subject here. A song is sung by me. So here the definition of passive voice, it comes in this way, like in which the subject does not perform the action denoted by the verb. So whatever the action is said, given by the verb here, it is not done by subject, and for that purpose it is example of passive voice. And rather than that, the verb, but it is acted upon. So particular object is acted upon, somebody is acting on it. Like children are forced, they are not coming to their for their choice, their will, and they are forced to come. So example of passive voice. So somebody is acting on the object, it is an example of passive voice. Okay, so the simple technique, like the subject is passive, it does not act or perform anything, and for that purpose example of passive voice. Okay, now let's see some of the differences between active and passive voice. Like see, in the active voice, we'll look for the first one. In the active voice, what happens? The subject of an active verb is the agent or door. Door means a subject only of the action denoted by the verb. So whatever the verbs are given in active voice, they are strictly acted by the subject. So when the subject is acting upon a verb, example of active voice, but exactly opposite is happening in passive voice. How? The subject of a passive voice verb is not the agent. It means it's not a subject of the action, and for that purpose it is denoted by the verb. Means what here? The passive voice, okay, passive voice subject is not acting on the verb, but actually somebody is acting on that, and for that purpose exactly it is the example of passive voice. Okay, it's very easy to identify the passive voice examples or form. How? Let's see number 3 sentence. In the passive voice, to be forms. Okay, to be forms. You know, in English we have some forms like to be form, to have form. So these are to be forms. To be forms of the verbs are used in this sentence, and they are used with verb third form. Verb third form. Like look at here, is written. So is what here? To be form. Was is to be form, and were is also to be form. So am, is, are, was, were, this all are to be forms, and with them with3 form is given. Written, is written. So is what here? To be form, and with3 form is written, and for that purpose it is an example of passive voice. Was taken, so to be form plus v3. Here were awarded, to be form plus v3. Getting it? So this is the simple technique to identify the passive voice. And look at number 4th sentence. In the passive voice, the agent means subject of the action denoted by the verb may or may not be mentioned. It means in the passive voice, the subject may be mentioned or may not be mentioned. Example like the instructions were given. The instructions were given, but who has given that? not mention here subject. All right. Look at here. I have given one example. A tiger was seen near the river. A tiger was seen near the river, but who has seen that? It's not given here. So are you getting it? In the passive voice, sometimes the agent, the doer, I mean subject, will not be mentioned sometime. Clear? And that's what, in this way, we understand the example of active and passive voice. I hope, dear children, you might have just got the basic concept about active and passive voice. Remember, in simple way, that the active voice, the subject is acting, working upon verb. In the passive voice, the subject is not acting on the verb, but the object is given more importance. Object has taken, somebody is acting, like object is acting on the verb, and for that purpose, it is an example of passive voice. I hope the points are clear to you. This was just the part 1. In the next part, we'll discuss about example of active passive voice, how to identify them, and how to change the active voice into the passive voice. So thank you so much, dear children. Watch it again to understand carefully.